My husband believed that the piece of paper I signed when I was 22 could erase 15 years of my existence. He had no idea the same piece of paper would end his entire career. The silence in our home had texture. It was thick and smooth, like the polished concrete flooring that covered the entire 7,000 square feet of our Palo Alto mansion. It was a paid-for silence designed to be tranquil. But to me, it was simply empty. I stood at the kitchen's 10-foot marble island, meticulously placing a tray of lox, capers, and thinly sliced red onion alongside a basket of fresh, warm bagels. The sunlight, which was likewise constructed to be flawless, streamed through the floor to ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air. The only chaotic, unplanned elements in the entire house. The house was not a dwelling. It was a gallery with Mark as the artist. I was only the curator, the quiet figure who ensured that every piece was correctly positioned. The walls conveyed his narrative, not ours. There he stood, shaking hands with the governor. He was in a black tie outfit, accepting a technology award. There he was on the cover of Wired. There were no pictures of us, only Emily and Mark. There were just images of Mark Jensen, the founder and CEO of Jensen Technologies, and the people he knew well. I heard the gentle click of his Italian leather shoes on the floor before saw him. He walked into the kitchen in a navy blue suit tailored so well that it appeared like a second skin, his gaze already fixed on his phone's bright screen. "Morning, honey," he murmured, brushing his lips on my cheek in a gesture so familiar that it had lost all significance. It was a human semicolon, a small break in his never-ending flood of digital communication. "Good morning, Mark. I made breakfast. Thank you, babe. Early meeting with investors. Aura is about to transform the world." I understood all about Aura, his new flagship product. A new AI-powered user interface that claimed to predict human requirements. I also knew that it had devoured him for the past 2 years, leaving him as a ghost at the dinner table. "I understand. You've worked so hard. I prepared the geisha coffee you enjoy." "Fantastic. You're the best," he said while browsing. He put the coffee, which is worth more per ounce than certain perfumes, into a travel mug. He did not look up. "It will be a late one tonight. Celebration supper for the new contract. Don't wait up." He took a sip of his coffee, grabbed his briefcase, and walked away. He never sat down. He never made eye contact. He never ate a single bite of the lovely, lavish breakfast I had spent an hour cooking. I stood alone in the huge kitchen, the silence filling the void left by his brief presence. I gazed at the exquisite platter of food, a still life of my own unseen labor. With a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of my soul, I began wrapping everything in plastic, the crinkling sound reverberating through the silence. His leftovers. My life. Later, I found myself in the garage. It was the only area in the house that actually belonged to me because he never entered. My ancient easel was tucked away in a forgotten corner, covered in dusty sheets. Next to it is a wooden crate with hardened oil paint tubes and half-finished canvases. I removed the covering, the dust making me sneeze. I brushed my palm over a stiff, blank canvas, the rough texture evoking a phantom leg from a life I'd given up long ago. The acceptance letter from the San Francisco Art Institute had been my happiest moment in life. I was 21, my portfolio was full of ideas, and my future seemed like a vivid, chaotic world that I couldn't wait to paint. Then, I met Mark. He was intelligent, ambitious, and completely captivating. He had a dream of his own, a small business he ran from his garage. He said he needed me. He claimed that he lacked my imagination and perspective on the world. He claimed we were a team. So I put off my admittance for a year to aid him. A year turned into 2, and then 5. I created his first logo, assisted him in writing his first business plan, and arranged his life so he could focus on the code. I became a silent partner, the ideal support system for Jensen Technologies' spectacular development. The letter from the Art Institute remained in a box somewhere, a yellowed memento to a forgotten hope. The office was a reflection of Mark's ego. It was perched on the highest floor of a building and provided a god's eye view of San Francisco Bay. The furniture was all harsh edges and chrome, frigid and unyielding. It was late, and the city was a sparkling tapestry below, but Mark was not looking at the view. He was looking at his reflection in the glass, a contented smile on his lips. Alan, his lawyer, stood alongside him, his face fixed in a smart, calculated attitude. "Is everything in place?" Mark inquired, his tone quiet and assured. Rock solid, Alan stated, patting a thick binder. The prenuptial agreement is watertight. She receives nothing from the corporation. There is only a limited spousal support plan for 12 months. The house is a business asset. So are the cars. Mark's smile broadened into a smirk. It was a chilly expression, devoid of any warmth or recall of the 15 years we'd spent together. Good. She's become accustomed to a certain lifestyle. It is time for a reality check. She is nothing without me. He really believed it. He saw me as a line item on his balance sheet, an asset whose worth had completely decayed. And he was prepared to write me out. I had made the decision to attempt. I was a fool, but I needed to try. I had prepared a romantic supper in a desperate attempt to reignite a flame that had long since faded to a pilot light. I lit candles, opened a bottle of the pricey Cabernet he preferred, and prepared his favorite medium rare ribeye steak. The table was set for two. Our song, a lovely jazz tune from our first date, was playing quietly on the speakers. I was wearing a dress that he once said he adored. When the front door opened, my heart fluttered with hope, but he was not alone. Alan the lawyer trailed him like a dark shadow. Mark's expression was one of frigid indifference. The hopeful flutter in my breast faded, replaced by a chilly, sinking dread. Mark, what's happening? Who is this? He did not even look at the beautifully arranged table. He stepped over and threw a big manila folder onto it, scattering the rose petals I had placed. It landed directly next to his steak. I want a divorce. The words lingered in the air, piercing and poisonous. The music appeared to mock me. Divorce. The word felt foreign, as if it happened to other people in movies. A divorce. My voice was a whisper. Why? What did I do wrong? Didn't do anything wrong, Emily, he replied, his voice easygoing and even bored, which was the cruelest part. You simply don't fit anymore. I have discovered someone else. Her name is Sarah. He delivered the sentences with the emotional intensity of a man contemplating a corporate merger. It was more than just the betrayal of infidelity. It was the cold absence of any human emotion. I was an out-of-date piece of software, and he was upgrading. He pointed his manicured finger at the folder on the table. These are the divorce papers and a copy of the prenuptial agreement you signed. My lawyer, Alan, will explain everything. It would be in your best interests to comply. My universe did not simply break, it atomized. One moment I was a wife attempting to save her marriage, and the next I was a stranger in my own home, presented with my own obsolescence. I recall slipping to the kitchen floor, cold marble seeping through my clothing. The sound that emerged from me was visceral and animalistic, like a wail of pure, unadulterated misery. The life I had methodically crafted, the sacrifices I had made, and the love I had poured into this man. All of it was a lie, a 15-year marriage. The days after were a whirl of shame. I packed my belongings into inexpensive cardboard boxes while the housekeeper, a lady I had recruited and treated well, observed me with sympathy and discomfort. Every object I touched represented a memory, a chunk of my life being taken away. The ceramic mug I produced during a pottery class we took together. I used to sleep in his worn-out sweater. Each one is a new cut. I relocated from a 7,000 square foot mansion in Palo Alto to a small, one-bedroom apartment in Oakland with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall. The contrast was a physical blow. The air smelled of old grease and sadness. Our pals, the couples we'd entertained for innumerable dinner parties, now had full voicemail boxes. My calls remained unanswered. My texts were marked as read. I had been excommunicated from my own life, expelled out of the kingdom Mark had established. I was completely, terrifyingly alone. My final hope was the legal system. Surely, a judge would recognize the injustice. 15 years of my life needed to be worthwhile. I was assigned a public defender, a haggard, middle-aged guy named Mr. Davies, whose office was clogged with stacks of paperwork, each symbolizing another broken life. He flipped through the prenup, his countenance getting wary with each page. He finally looked up at me, above his reading spectacles. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Jensen. This contract is a fortress. Mark has the best lawyers in the business. You gave up all rights to the company, its assets, and any future earnings. He has been planning this for a long time. My voice quivered, heavy with desperation. But I gave up everything for him. During my job in childhood, I was his first partner. Mr. Davies sighed, the sound of someone who had delivered the same bad news 1,000 times. Legally speaking, Emily, those sacrifices do not qualify as financial contributions. The system is cruel in this regard. My advice? Accept the meager alimony he is offering and try to start over. I went out of his office and into the hot afternoon sun, feeling absolutely depleted. Everything I thought was supposed to safeguard people like me, including the law and justice, was just another instrument in the hands of the wealthy. The anguish I had been drowning in began to curdle, forming a cold, tight knot of hatred in my stomach. The pain was so intense, so overwhelming, that it burned itself out, leaving a cold, silent nothingness. I spent the first few weeks at my new apartment in suspended animation. I'd spend hours sitting on a cardboard box, staring at the brick wall outside my window. Tears had run out. The shouting into the pillow had stopped. All that remained was a deep, simmering hum of sheer anger. One night, driven by cheap wine and misery, I began unpacking. I needed to find a fork. I tore open a box labeled Studio Supplies Old. Inside, amid a tangle of dried-up paintbrushes, I found my old college sketchbooks. Ghost of the woman I once was. I took one out, the pages stiff from age, and began to flip through it. There were life drawings, landscape studies, and partially completed concepts. And then I stopped. My breath got locked in my throat. An entire concept was sketched up across a dozen pages. I dubbed a collection of sketches and flowcharts, emotion-based user interface. Notes in my own handwriting showed how technology may learn and anticipate human emotional needs in addition to logical ones. It was an idea I had on a wet Tuesday night years ago when Mark complained about being stalled on a new project. I recall staying up until 3 a.m., excitedly sketching everything out, and then slipping the book over the breakfast table to him the following morning. "How about something like this?" I asked. He kissed my forehead and exclaimed, "This is amazing, truly." A feverish intensity overtook me. I hurried for the box of financial paperwork my lawyer had instructed me to duplicate before leaving the house. My hands trembled as I rummaged through files, looking for anything relating to his new product, Aura. I discovered it, the original patent registration documents. My heart felt as if it were being squeezed in a vise. I read the primary inventor's name on the fundamental patents, which are the foundational technology of his billion-dollar revolution. It was not Mark Jensen. It was not even Jensen Technologies. The name was Sarah Chen, his mistress. He had not simply cheated on me. He hadn't simply left me. He had stolen the one wonderful idea I'd ever shared with him, the result of my own discarded brilliance, and given it her name. It was a calculated maneuver, designed to protect his most precious possession from our divorce. It was the last, twisting spin of the knife. And at that moment, something inside me snapped. The sadness, grief, and helplessness fled, replaced by a white-hot, clear wrath. The guy perished on the floor of that decrepit Oakland apartment. A predator has been born. The next morning, I walked into a pawn shop with the only expensive item I had left tacked, a simple diamond necklace my mother had given me before her death. I didn't flinch when the man behind the desk offered me a fraction of the price. I took the cash and went straight to the bank. That afternoon, I was sitting in Ava Chen's sleek, minimalist office. There is no relation to the other Chen, luckily. Ava was a Silicon Valley legend, a shark-like intellectual property litigator who took on corporate behemoths and won. She was sharp, well-dressed, and had eyes that appeared to look straight through you. I spent most of the jewelry money on her retainer. I told her everything. I did not cry. My voice was steady and cool. I arranged the sketchbook next to the patent files. I informed her about the prenup, the house, and the past 15 years of my life. She listened closely, her fingers tucked behind her chin. When I finished, she turned from the sketchbook to me, a slow, deadly smile spreading over her lips. "Mark is arrogant," she remarked, her voice like silk-wrapped steel. "He was so secure in his prenup that he became careless. He considers you a weak, emotional housewife who understands nothing about his world. That is his blind spot. And we will drive a truck straight through it." The weeks that followed marked a total metamorphosis. I traded in my soft cashmere sweaters for sharp, structured blazers. Mark had always admired my long hair, so I had it chopped into a sleek, no-nonsense bob. I spent 12 hours a day at the public library reading books on patent law and copyright infringement until the legal jargon began to sound like a second language. I was more than simply a client. I was Ava's ally in this conflict. I also began making calls, not to the fair weather pals who had abandoned me, but to my old art world acquaintances. I knew the gallery owners, critics, and artists before meeting Mark. I informed them that I was working on a new project, a conceptual artwork about identity and production in the digital age. They were curious. My former life, which I had abandoned, was about to become my greatest weapon. Ava's office became our battle room. A massive whiteboard was covered in timelines, images, legal precedents, and company diagrams. It was a stunning, complicated web of our own creation. His biggest vulnerability is his greatest triumph, I added, referring to a news release on the board. The official launch of Aura. It's in 3 weeks at the Moscone Center. The entire IT world will be present. The media, investors, and everyone. Ava grinned. Public execution. I like it. But how can we get this evidence in front of them? We do not deliver it to them. We make them come to us, I said, a thrill coursing through my veins. He believes art is my weakness, a frivolous hobby. I plan to use it to ruin him. We are going to hold a pop-up art exhibition, just across the street from his launch event. Ava's eyes brightened up with realization. Oh, that's vicious. I love it. A pop-up exhibition is a non-threatening creative event. It slips entirely under the radar. But the art itself, I said, my voice falling to a near whisper, will be the evidence. This will not be an accusation. There will be a story, my story. And I'll title it, The Architect of Our Gay Stolen Narrative. Mark was so protected by his own hubris that he hardly noticed my presence. He issued one letter through his lawyer, a normal cease and desist, urging me to stop harassing him and accept the settlement offer. He considered me a gnat, a small bother. His total contempt for me was the best disguise I could have hoped for. While he was preparing for the most important speech of his life, I was prepared to read his eology. The day of the Aura debut was electrifying. The area around the Moscone Center in San Francisco was packed with people. Tech journalists wearing press passes, venture capitalists dressed in costly casual attire, and influencers lived streaming to their audiences. Every lamppost was adorned with giant banners featuring the sleek, shimmering Aura logo. It was the coronation of King Mark. Inside, he was on stage, reveling in the brilliance of the spotlights. He wore his characteristic black turtleneck, exuding the image of a tech visionary. He gazed out at the sea of adoring faces, like a victor surveying his domain. Across the street, in a small, rented gallery space with whitewashed walls, my own event was quietly starting. There were no dazzling lights or deafening music, just the faint buzz of a few dozen famous art experts and journalists whom I had personally invited. They strolled across the room, their faces ranging from interest to intrigue to shock as they viewed the displays. The gallery's centerpiece was a large, high-resolution image of pages from my sketchbook from 15 years ago, the emotion-based UI design. Next to it, similarly huge, was a certified copy of Sarah Chen's Aura patent, which was filed only 2 years earlier. The other pieces were more abstract canvases layered with redacted legal documents from my divorce, a sculpture made from the broken pieces of a perfect home, and a timeline of Jensen Technologies' development that prominently highlighted my early contributions. Contributions that had been completely erased from the official company history. Back at the Moscone Center, Mark took the podium. The applause was tremendous. Aura is not just a product, he said, his voice full of polished assurance. It is a revolution in human-computer interaction. Ava was seated in a coffee shop 2 blocks away when she pushed the send button on an email. Every journalist in the auditorium received a news release that included a link to a digital version of my complete exhibit, as well as a brief, shocking description of intellectual property theft. At first, only a few scattered phone screens lit up, then a couple more. A quiet murmur began to spread among the gathering. A journalist in the front row read the email, his eyes opened, and he stood up and walked out, leaving his camera operator scrambling behind him. Then another followed, and another. Mark stuttered as his well-rehearsed speech caught in his throat. The crowd's admiring gaze was breaking. They weren't looking at him anymore. They were staring at their phones and whispering to each other, their expressions a mix of uncertainty and excitement. A big story was breaking, but it wasn't the one Mark was telling. Flustered, he peered out through the convention center's large glass wall, looking for the cause of the disruption. Then he saw it. He noticed my gallery across the street. He noticed the exhibit's title in large lettering on the window, The Architect of Aura. He noticed the large, lighted side-by-side contrast between my sketchbook and his patent. And then he saw me. I was standing just inside the gallery's glass door, bathed in lovely light and dressed in a spotless white power suit. I was not crying. I was not screaming. I was merely watching him, my demeanor totally serene and neutral. I carefully raised my champagne glass in a silent, heartbreaking toast. Our gazes met across the 4 lanes of traffic. I witnessed his face go through a lifetime's worth of emotions in 10 seconds. Arrogant assurance turned into uncertainty. Confusion gave way to a dawning knowledge, and realization turned into sheer, unmitigated dread. His face turned pallid, his breath caught. He staggered back 1 step from the podium, his hand shooting to his chest. He knew. In that single, soul-shattering moment, he realized he was done, and he knew who did it, and he understood why. The murmur in the auditorium turned into commotion as reporters dashed for the exits, heading to the true story across the street. On the large financial news tickers behind Mark's head, the stock symbol for Jensen Technologies, JNSN, which had been rising all morning in anticipation of the launch, abruptly turned red and began to fall in real time. He was wrecked, and he was forced to watch it all unfold on a 20-foot screen behind his head. The reaction was fast and harsh. The tech industry, which celebrates achievement with religious zeal, penalizes fraud with biblical intolerance. The SEC initiated a comprehensive probe into securities fraud. Jensen Technologies' board of directors called an emergency meeting and fired Mark, citing a morality clause in his employment contract. Sarah Chen, who faced the very real threat of prison time for patent fraud, instantly turned on him, telling prosecutors every element of his scam in exchange for amnesty. Mark Jensen, Silicon Valley's king, became a pariah overnight. He lost his business, income, and reputation. He was living in a rented condo and drowning in legal bills, according to the last I heard. He was nothing. A few weeks later, I was back in Ava's office, signing the final settlement paperwork. A gentle sense of calm washed over me. It was finally over. So that's that, I remarked, capping the pen. Ava grinned, a genuine and triumphant smile. Not quite. There is one more thing. A lovely little tidbit that Mark's army of bright lawyers totally overlooked. She pushed an old, ragged copy of my prenup across the table, pointing to a small, thick line hidden deep inside the boilerplate legal text. Clause 11 egg section C. It says, Ava read carefully, appreciating each sentence, that any and all intellectual property, conceived or created by either party in the term of the marriage, shall be considered joint marital property, regardless of the name under which it is registered or patented. I gazed at her, not quite comprehending. She leaned forward, her eyes bright. Emily, by organizing that art show, you accomplished more than merely expose his dishonesty. You established a legally unimpeachable public record, complete with expert testimony from the art critics who reviewed it, demonstrating that the core concept for the Aura patents was your idea, developed during your marriage. By demonstrating he stole it from you, you not only destroyed him, but also legally established yourself as co-owner of 50% of the patents. The air had left my lungs. I was speechless. I hadn't simply received justice. I hadn't merely obtained vengeance. In the most poetic and legally binding way conceivable, I had taken back half of his business. The cornerstone of his empire was now mine. My final scene is not set in a cool, minimalist home or a modern corporate office. It's here, at my new art studio in Sausalito, a vast, spacious place filled with the aroma of turpentine and possibilities. Sunlight shines through the industrial windows, illuminating the brilliant colors on the painting in front of me. I'm not a wife, victim, or CEO. I am a painter. I have a little, satisfied smile on my face. I am finally home. They say that revenge is best served cold. For me, it was simply about reclaiming what was mine. What about the taste? It is the flavor of justice.